I gave this book, I don't think you want to know. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know, my name is Faith and thank you so much for watching. Today we're going over my August reading wrap up. I don't think I have ever read 12 books in a month in my entire life. If you've watched my other wrap up videos, you probably know that I'm trying to get my physical TBR way down. I think when I did my first official count of it, I was at 66, and last month we left off at 57. Even though I've read like 30 books since we started doing it, I just keep buying more books, and I'm also reading books that I don't actually own. But somewhere along the lines, there was actually a little mishap with those numbers. Again, last month I ended with 57 books on my TBR, but something in me was telling me to do a recount, and I recounted and I actually got 55 books. So to celebrate, I bought 2 more books. I don't know where that miscalculation occurred, but it did, and I made up for it with those 2 books, but I miscounted my recount and I was actually only 1 off, not 2 off. So my recount was 55, it actually should have been 56. And I also got 2 other books this month, Dark Days Ahead and Love Arranged. Normally I tell you exactly when a book went onto my physical TBR and went off, but I completely forgot to keep track of that this month. And with that recount, it kind of messed things up for me. So we're just gonna say I started the month with 60 books on my physical TBR, and instead of going through and giving you an update each time one goes on or off the physical TBR in this video, I'm just gonna tell you what we ended the month with at the end of this video. As usual, this video will contain spoilers and I will put timestamps in the description so that you can avoid them. And with that out of the way, let's jump into it. The first book I read this month was A Touch of Chaos, and it was the last book in the Hades and Persephone saga. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I was really hoping I would like it more than the other ones, but I did not. It had a really strong start, and at first it was shaping up to be one of my top rated books in the series, but it just had a pretty slow finish, and there were certain things that happened throughout the book that I just didn't really like. Hades' mom was mentioned in this book, and I don't remember her being mentioned in any of the previous 6 books. I don't know if I just missed the mention or if it genuinely wasn't mentioned, but honestly, I don't think I missed it. So she was literally introduced in this book just to die. Like, she's literally introduced and then dies right after. That was just really weird to me. That felt super unnecessary. I didn't mark my rating down at all based off of that because it was so brief. I just thought that was really weird. I also didn't like how many chapters Dionysus and Theseus got and how long they were. Why would we care so much about those characters when they were just introduced? And why would they only start getting chapters dedicated to them in the 6th and 7th book? Honestly, it really felt like those were just there to add more spice scenes because it felt like almost all of those chapters had smut in them. There's a moment in the middle of this book where it's literally just back to back to back deaths. Apollo, Hera, Phaedra. I don't know why they were all so close together because they didn't even really die in their same event. They each had their own very unique specific death. I don't know if there was a purpose for them to be all right next to each other, but I feel like they should have just been spread out more. There were also just a few moments that weren't wrapped up fully, specifically Apollo and Hyacinth. Like I just said, Apollo died, so obviously he went to the underworld, and Hyacinth was in the underworld, so you'd think they'd be together, right? But then apparently Hyacinth wants to reincarnate, and then we don't really hear anything about their relationship at all for the rest of the book. So it's like, did you just forget about that plot line, or did you want to leave it more open? Either way, I'm gonna pretend that Hyacinth didn't reincarnate yet and they can have some time in the underworld together. Overall, honestly, I did really like this series and this book itself, even though I did just have a lot of negatives to say about it. The overall Hades and Persephone storyline in this book I did really enjoy. And again, the start was very strong, but it did just start losing me a bit halfway through, and the end was pretty slow. Just because of how slow the last half of the book was, honestly, it wasn't the best conclusion to the story in my opinion. But again, overall, I did enjoy it. I had a fun time reading this book and the entire series. So again, 4 stars, and I would recommend the series. And then I went to Tokyo. In these next 4 books, I did cover in a separate video. You guys should check that out. I was actually planning on talking about them briefly in that video and more in depth in this video, but I ended up going more in depth in that video than I thought, so I'm gonna keep this video fairly brief with them. So the second book of the month was Ski You Later. This is the first ski romance that I've ever read, and honestly, it was really cute. I ended up giving it 4.25 stars, and I definitely would recommend it. And there is no spice for my non-spice lovers. I went into this book knowing literally nothing about skiing, so what I'm about to say is honestly both a negative and a positive. There were some times where it felt like it was more about the skiing than their romance, which honestly I am okay with because again, I knew nothing about the sport going into this book, and I came out with a lot of knowledge about it. Do I know everything? Obviously not, but I know way more than I did going into it. But I do also just wish we got more little romance moments and slightly less info on skiing. But again, overall, I don't really see that as a negative thing. So if you're telling yourself, oh, I don't want to read that, I don't know anything about skiing, read it. You will be fine. She covers plenty of the sport. And I do actually have one more complaint about this book, and that is the fact that I think it has a bad representation of alcohol consumption. Towards the beginning, there's a scene where the FMC gets blackout drunk, but she doesn't get hungover. But she drinks a few more times during the book, gets hungover all of those times, but didn't black out any of those times. So if you don't know, if you get blackout drunk, that means you overdosed on alcohol, and you will 100% be hungover, especially if you get hungover when you don't drink that much. Alcohol is a depressant and very easy to be addicted addicted to. So I just feel like something like that is very important to represent accurately. That is genuinely my only negative complaint about this book, but I do feel like that is kind of a big one. But again, 4.25 stars, I would recommend it. And then we have Face Off, and this was my first 5-star read in about 3 months. I loved this book, and I'm having a real hard time not dethroning The Deal. If you've watched my videos, you know how serious that claim is, because in every single video where I mention hockey romances, I mention Elle Kennedy, and I mention The Deal, and I mention how I don't think anything will ever dethrone The Deal. Honestly, I feel bad even saying it. I'm gonna go ahead and say they tie because I love them both so much. Honestly, they both sit at my #1 spot. But just know, that is how good I think this book is. I loved literally every single thing about this book, except for one itty bitty thing. Chapter 19 says that they lost to Chicago, and then in chapter 22 it says that they won, but then in chapter 23 it says that they lost. So I don't know if them saying they won in chapter 22 was like a joke that I missed, or if that was genuinely just an accident, but it's just something I noticed, and honestly, not a big deal at all. I do actually have one other complaint. However, it is more a complaint of the sports romance genre as a whole, and I did touch on it when I talked about this video in my What I Read in Tokyo video, and because I have so many books to go over in this video, honestly, I'm not going to touch on it because, again, it's not really specifically about this book. If you're curious what that was, feel free to go check out that video. Even if you're not curious, you should go check out that video. But again, Face Off, 5 stars. Highly recommend it. Book 5 comes out in November. You have plenty of time to read those first 4 books. And then we have my 4th read, which was Trouble. If you watched my Tokyo video, you would know I gave this 3 stars, but honestly, I decided to go ahead and change that to 2.5. The characters were just poorly written in my opinion. Specifically Indy, we were constantly told that she was this way and then shown that she was this other way. For example, we are told that she is insanely mistrusting, very much a loner, but then her college roommate shows up and convinces her they're friends with basically 0 effort. And that pretty much happens with all of her friendships throughout the entire book. Sebastian is constantly trying to convince Indy to give him a second chance, and every single time she tells him no with the exact same reasoning, and so that just got super repetitive when we've heard the conversation like 30 times. You know when people say, oh, they're definitely breaking up after the epilogue? This is a couple that they're talking about. Their relationship really just didn't make sense to me at all. I'd say 99% of Indy's actions felt like she was only doing it because of the plot. If she did things based on who we were told her character was, the book would have been 1000% different. Again, I gave it 2.5 stars. Honestly, I wouldn't recommend it. The next book we have is The Rule Breaker. This is another one I gave 3 stars in that video, and again, I did actually change it down to 2.5. I do feel like overall, this book really just wasn't for me, but I did still have a lot of negative feelings about it. These were genuinely some of the flattest one-dimensional characters I have ever read about in my entire life. They had 2 deep conversations throughout the entire book, so their relationship progression made absolutely no sense. They see each other at a party towards the beginning, and it is insta-lust, which I am not a fan of at all. The best thing I have to say about this book is that I did think that the spicy scenes were actually well written. Not all of them. There were a couple times where it got pretty cringy, but overall, I do think they were pretty well written. So I did give a little higher rating for that. I thought this was on KU. Apparently it wasn't, so I accidentally bought it, so I felt obligated to finish it. If I didn't purchase it, I probably would have DNF'd this. It's pretty much a combination of tropes that I'm just not really a big fan of. So again, 2.5 stars. I would not recommend it. And then we have It Happened One Summer. I actually read Hook, Line, and Sinker a few years ago because I didn't realize that was the second book in this series. I don't know why, but I was kind of scared to read this because I just felt like I really wouldn't like it, but I actually liked it a lot and I ended up giving it 4.5 stars and I would recommend it. Also, a few days after I finished this, they announced it was going to be a movie, so that timing was literally perfect. Again, I liked it way more than I thought I would. I think the reason I thought I wouldn't is because I wasn't the biggest fan of Hook, Line, and Sinker, but honestly the only thing I can think of that I didn't like about this book was that Piper was very annoying to me at the beginning. But then once Brendan got introduced and Piper got less spoiled, I was a way bigger fan of the book. It's been a while since I read Hook, Line, and Sinker, so I don't remember it that well, but I do think I like this one more. Unlike the last couple books I read, these characters were not one-dimensional. I felt they were very multi-layered. The characters just made sense. Their actions felt very realistic. And so after those last 2 books, that was a huge positive for me. And that's pretty much all I have to say about this book. I'm excited for the movie. Again, 4.5 stars. I would recommend it. And then we have Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. This is a collection of Lewis Carroll stories and they're both in here, so I only took 1 off my physical TBR, but I did go ahead and put 2 books towards the amount of books that I've read this year because they are 2 different stories. Because they're pretty short, there's not a ton that I have to say about either of them, so I'm just going to talk about them together. I gave Alice in Wonderland 4 stars and I gave Through the Looking Glass 3.5. With Alice in Wonderland, it started off so fast. She's literally down the rabbit hole on page 1, if not page 2, and I don't think there's anything I love more than a fast-paced start. Because I've seen the movie, it wasn't super confusing. I feel like if I hadn't seen the movie, I would have been confused. Speaking of the movie, last week I continued my series of comparing books to their film or TV show adaptation, and I did Alice in Wonderland. So you should go check that out. And while we're talking about it, I did actually forget to rate how accurate I think it was. On a scale of 1 to 5, I would give the film a 3 out of 5 accuracy to the book. If you want to know why, go check out that video. If you like the movie, I definitely would recommend the book. I think you'd like it. Again, because I've seen the movie, I wasn't really confused at all while reading the book, but with Through the Looking Glass, there were definitely a couple times where I was confused. I also just didn't really like Through the Looking Glass as much as I did Alice in Wonderland, but overall, I did like it. It was a fun little read. They're both super fast-paced, which again, I love. I know that they're kid books, but I feel like they're just books that are kind of like timeless, you know? Like, I'm 22, half the books I read this month had smut in them, but I still enjoyed the kids' book. Again, I would recommend them both. And then we have Dark Days Ahead by Natalie Docherty. And this book is actually very special to me because the author sent it to me. I feel so honored. This is the first time an author has ever sent me their book. I hope that it happens again. There's a couple arcs that I've applied to. Not sure I'll get them. I probably won't, but hey, who knows? But this book was actually really good. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I definitely would recommend it. This is a tech thriller with magic. The author describes it as Ready Player One meets Practical Magic and Black Mirror meets Charmed. Honestly, I feel like that's a pretty good description. This book has a very well thought out magic system, which I know for a lot of people can make or break the book. It is very clear how much it was thought about. That being said, because of that, there is a ton of info dumping. At one point, there's literally a 20-page chapter that is nothing but info dump. But because of that, you really get a good understanding of the magic system. But at times, it definitely did feel like way too much info dumping. Even though it was 4 stars, I did have a couple other problems with it as well. First, they master their powers with little to no effort, and that pretty much goes for every character with powers in the book. And also, every problem that arises is solved very, very fast. I'm talking usually within a paragraph or 2, sometimes maybe up to a page or 2, but it is very fast and happens to pretty much every problem that they face. I feel like more time should have been dedicated to them solving their problems and mastering their powers rather than all the info dumping. The book does end on a cliffhanger, and I'm very excited for book 2. Even with those little negatives, again, I still gave it 4 stars and I would recommend it. And then we have Power Play, which is the second book in the DC Star series. Another 5-star read. I loved this book. I did love it slightly less than Face Off, but still 5 stars. My only complaint is that in the synopsis, it says that they have a drunken night in Vegas and end up getting married. Marriage of convenience and the Vegas wedding is also one of the main selling points the author uses when promoting the book, but that literally doesn't happen until just past halfway through the book. So I feel like at that point, that's just a spoiler for the book. If it's gonna be in the synopsis and one of your main selling points for the book, I feel like that should have happened way sooner, like by 30% at the absolute latest. Because is it really a marriage of convenience story if they are married for less than half of the book? I don't know. I did love it. I just think they should have marketed it differently. But again, it is 5 stars and I definitely recommend it. But I will add, this one does have quite a few smut scenes, a lot more than the first one. So if you don't really like smutty books, I probably wouldn't recommend this. But if you don't mind spice or you like spice, definitely read this book. So here's the thing, guys. I'm about to lose a lot of you, and I just need you to hear me out, okay? The next book I read was Pride and Prejudice. And before we get into it, let's just take a moment. I think this cover is just so freaking cute. And the spine, look at that. Gorgeous. And the back, look at that. Gorgeous. You know what? We'll give you a nice little zoom in. Hopefully that works. Probably didn't. What do I have to say about this book? I'm gonna preface. I have never seen the movie. I have never seen Pride and Prejudice. I know. I'm sorry. It just hasn't been a priority for me. But I will watch it, I promise. I think I'm just not a classics person, guys. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But I just don't think I am. Because you know what I gave this book? I don't think you want to know. I gave it a 3.5. Is that the worst rating? No. But like, I wanted to like it so much more than I did. What I'm going to do is watch the movie, and then I'm going to reread the book, and then hopefully that rating goes up, assuming I like the movie. If I don't like the movie, guys, I'm probably not going to reread the book. But if I like the movie, I probably will. There were just times where I was confused, and I think a lot of it has to do with just the language and the wording that they used back then. So I do think watching the movie will help with that. And guys, honestly, I'm just gonna leave it at that because I know this book is near and dear to so many people's hearts, and I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I promise you, I will watch the movie, and assuming I like the movie, I will reread the book and give it another chance. So for now, 3.5 stars. If you're like me and don't read a ton of classics and you're easily confused by that stuff, I would watch the movie first. But guys, I will give this another chance. I promise. I want to love Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy. So 3.5 for now. For now. We are finally at the final book that I read this month, which was Breaking Point by Mads Rafferty. Surprise, surprise, another hockey romance. I loved this book. I do not remember the last time I cried this much at a book. I literally cried while reading the last 30 pages. I mentioned this book a couple videos ago when I talked about my most anticipated reads for the rest of the year. I can't even think of the proper words to describe this book. The characters' feelings go so deep. This book explores grief. It explores love. It explores so much. It is so emotional. If you're expecting a cute, fun rom-com, yes, there are moments that are like that, but again, this book goes deep with emotions. It is more storm clouds than sunshine in this book. It is so good and it was so moving. My complaint with this book is that it takes place in Colorado, and as far as I'm aware, the characters all were American, yet they used a ton of Australian slang. I know that the author is Australian, so obviously that's why, but I do wish more research would have been done into American slang, because every single time they would say jumper instead of sweater or lead or lead instead of leash, it definitely pulled me out because I'm like, Americans would literally never say this. That being said, I do enjoy Australian and British slang. I think it's very fun, but again, just Americans wouldn't say that, so it does pull you out. So really, depending on where you're from, you might not even notice it. But again, 4.5 stars, I would recommend this book. Those are the 12 books that I read in August. And guess what? We hit our reading goal. We ended last month with, I think, 37 books read, and we finished with 49. My reading goal was 43, so we went way past it, and there are still 4 months left in the year. If you remember, I said we're gonna say that I started the month with 60 books on my physical TBR. We read 12 books, and my physical TBR is down to 55. I wish it was down way more than that, but most of the books I did read were on KU and I don't actually own them. That being said, I am determined to get below 50 by the end of September. And I really, really think that we will do it, guys. If you want to know if I do it, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss that video. And that is all that I have for you guys today. I hope that you all had good reading months in August. If not, I hope it's better in September. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow my Instagram in the description for more bookish content. We're officially in September. Fall is starting very soon. I know a ton of people have already decorated for fall. I'm probably going to soon. I hope you all have a wonderful fall. I hope you all have a fantastic day. Love you guys. Bye.